Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to the Myeloma Financial Coach chapter as part of the Myeloma Crowd Community Program by HealthTree. We are excited to have Diahanna Vallentine here. I will introduce her formally in just a moment. My name is Audrey Burton Bethke, and I'm the Myeloma Crowd Community Manager. This meeting is being recorded and will be sent out to all registrants along with the slides within 48 hours, of the event's conclusion. A big thank you to all of our sponsors. We have Abby, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Genentech, Karyopharm Therapeutics, Oncopeptides, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Takeda Oncology, and we actually just got a new sponsor, Sanofi. So thank you to them as well. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you our featured speaker, Diahanna Vallentine. So Diahanna is a myeloma coach, and she specializes in financial help for multiple myeloma patients and caregivers, which is why we call her our myeloma financial coach. As a professional financial consultant and former caregiver of her husband who had myeloma, Diahanna perfectly understands the financial issues facing myeloma patients. And because she understands these financial issues, she's extremely passionate about getting the education out to myeloma patients and their families. Today, today the topic is going to be family finances. You know, your money, my money, our money. And I'm going to turn the time over to Diahanna to explain to us, why did you choose this topic? Why is it important to you? And what do you want our audience to know? So Diahanna, the time is now yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. And I know there's probably people out there because I hear from you on occasion every week or so that you heard some of my other webinars. Thank you again. But you're also going to hear me preach, and I hate to say this, but preach or reiterate over and over the need to seek out professional help. I'm telling you, for everything that you depend on as far as income and assets and making sure bills are paid and making sure you can stay on treatment, everything has to do with this. So this meeting is very meaty. It's very dense. So I am going to try. I have a difficult time speaking slowly, but I'm going to try to make sure that I speak slowly so you can understand how important this is and what you need to do. Every single person needs to do this. Very important. And I also encourage you at the end of this to um, ask questions. All right, let's start with the first thing: your money, my money, our money. Um, I'm having some problems with this. I can't see the whole screen. Okay. Okay, this webinar is designed to help you understand the difference in ownership of assets as well as debt responsibilities within the laws of the state in which you reside. This is very important to understand. So you are better able to review your own financial situation. This can help you account for all contingencies during marriage and at death. You also need to be cognizant of making sure you access your assets correctly and tax efficiently to ensure a surviving spouse will be taken care of and that your needs as well will be met. Preparation now will prevent avoidable costs and personal hardship later. I cannot stress this enough. And I've had personal experience with this. So I'm telling you, this is something everyone needs to do. Whether you're ill or not, this needs to be taken care of. Seek the advice of a trusted financial planner or advisor and an estate attorney. Next slide. Preparation and pulling it all together. Now, this is a first step to make sure everything is done. Before we get into the real meat of the seminar, I want to stress the need for every couple to sit down again and look at everything they own: IRAs, pensions, brokerage accounts, life insurance, checking and savings accounts, certificates of deposit, cars, boats, vacation properties, and generational gifts or inheritances. This includes jewelry, antiques, art, etc. Anything with value. Understand the ownership laws of the state in which you live. Make sure you understand what passes in and outside of a will. And make sure if you have a trust set up, it is updated, and make sure you have proper powers of attorneys established, as well as trustees and guardianships if necessary. Next. Common law states the definition of spousal ownership. Types of ownership between spouses are defined by the state in which you live. There's common law and there's community. Right now, we're going to talk about common law. Common law property states, in which most states are a part of, and this is defined by who owns what, when property was acquired, who owns what, and when that property was acquired during marriage. Property that's acquired by one member of a married couple is owned completely by that person. If a deed or title contains both names, it is owned jointly with equal half ownership. Otherwise, you must look at ownership as joint tenancies with rights of survivorship or tenancy by the entirety, at which point all rights go to the surviving spouse, unless someone other than the spouse is on the title or the wills specifies the beneficiary is someone other than the spouse. This is very important to know. So everything you have, start pulling out titles, um, because as it's going to define how those things are going to be done. And if you start looking at those things now, you may find an error as to how you want those things to be left. If a property was titled as tenancy in common, then the property can go to someone other than the surviving spouse per the deceased will. Let's just say you have a home, a vacation home, and it's not only in your or your spouse's name and you live in a common law state. It may be you may have your son, grandchildren, or someone else on that property. You need to make sure that that's going to be owned correctly at your death. You don't want to necessarily have things in a state that have to be sold off in order to take care of final cost or debt. Additionally, not all property has a deed or title. In this case, generally, whoever paid for the property or received it as a gift owns it. This is important, especially if you have blended families and you wish to leave assets to children or other parties. So if you and your wife bought something a long time ago and it's still in and it's in both of your names, but you want to leave some of that to children either before marriage or during marriage or someone else, make sure you have those titles and everything set up correctly. This is where an estate attorney can come in and help make sure you look at those things and title them correctly. But keeping in mind that if some of those things need to be sold and it's okay for you to think those things need to be sold to take care of your spouse, those things have to be titled accordingly. Perhaps a trust may be appropriate. The next slide. Okay, property ownership again in common law states. Important to note, it is very important to figure out how finances will be managed before a crisis. If you find you may have to spend down assets in order to qualify for Medicaid, or if you have a lot of debt, seek out professional advice now. As you know, to qualify for Medicaid, you have to spend down on a lot of assets. And those assets can also include the assets a spouse may need in order as a survivor. Consider current financial needs of you and your spouse now, as well as future needs. Consider the pros and cons of spending the assets of the ill person first. Sometimes this is a really good advice or something to do. Again, speak to an estate attorney and financial planner or advisor to determine if you should retitle assets now and which assets should be used and in what order. Next slide. Community property, completely different than common law. Community property states definition of spousal ownership. Alaska, some of these states are Alaska, which is by agreement, Arizona, California, Idaho, Louisiana, Nevada, New Mexico, Texas, Washington, and Wisconsin. If you live in one of these community property states, the rules are much more complicated. Community property states follow the rule that all assets acquired during a marriage are considered community property and are owned jointly. Even if you used inheritance money or your sole earned income to purchase a home for you and your spouse, or commingled accounts from money you had prior to marriage, it is now considered community property. And it is not just, I want you to understand, it's not just in the event someone passed, one of the spouses end up passing. It also means how this property is going to be considered when you want to sell something, or if the other person needs access to something. You know, it's all state laws will come into effect, or if you end up getting divorced or separated. Very important to know how your state handles ownership of property. Next slide. All assets acquired before marriage are considered separate property and are owned by the original owner. However, a spouse can transfer the title or any of their personal property to the other spouse via a gift or to the community property, i.e., by example, by making the spouse a joint owner on a bank account. Spouses can also commingle their separate property with community property by adding funds from before the marriage to community property funds. So once you do that, you cannot separate it. It is now community funds. Via separation, divorce, or by death, it still can be considered community funds. Next slide. The ability or inability to transfer, alter, eliminate, or sell assets in community property state, very important to listen to. Spouses may not transfer, alter, or eliminate any whole piece of community property without the other spouse's permission. They can, however, manage their own half. Remember, the whole piece includes the other spouse's one half interest, meaning that the spouse cannot alienate the one half that belongs to them. So if you have property that you need or you want to have turned over or left in inheritance to someone else, make sure ahead of time that you can actually go and have those titles changed. Remember, if you're going to qualify, you need to qualify for Medicaid, you think sometime in the future, remember the look back period. It's 5 years for the look back. So the earlier you do this, depending on how you want this to be handled, make sure you get them done ahead of time. Talk to a financial advisor, talk to an estate attorney to make sure you're making the right move, because it can be costly for you and the rest of your family later on. Next slide. Is a surviving spouse responsible for deceased spouse medical debt in a community property state? Keep in mind that all earnings and debt occurred during a marriage are joint property or responsibility. That means if you live in a community state, you can be held responsible for your spouse's medical debt, even if you did not sign as a responsible party. Creditors can come after joint property. I would recommend speaking to an attorney to mitigate the possibility of this happening. Perhaps they can give up their rights by in a trust, but that trust can make sure they're taken care of. Remember, if you have assets in an IRA or 401k, it cannot be touched by creditors. But if you transfer money out, it can. It might be to your advantage to not move funds out of the IRA or 401k for protection. That doesn't mean you cannot take distributions from them to live on for income. Example, considers the option of spending the assets of the old person first, which means possibly some of their assets that could be pulled from a creditor, and saving the rest of those things that cannot be accessed, especially if you're ill and you're incurring a lot of medical debt. Very important to look at how much debt you assume have now and how much debt you think might be carried forward. Speak to a financial advisor and elder care attorney regarding the best way to handle your assets now, and how to best use your income sources. Next slide. Make sure you understand your options if you live in a common law state and own property in a community state or vice versa. You will have to accommodate both jurisdictions. Probably, sorry, apologize for that. That means, and that happened to me, we live in one state, but we have property in a different state with a different types of titles. And so at my husband's death, we had to make sure that those were things were taken care of, which means I had to seek an attorney in that state where the property was, as well as the state that I live in. Next slide. Here's some considerations. If you find that you are now and maybe in the future spending through your savings for your healthcare, which you had intended for you and your spouse to last through your retirement, it may be prudent to consider a long-term care policy for your spouse if they are healthy enough. It could be more expensive, but it may be less expensive on the end side, because having them taken care of, the cost for the long-term care policy now may mitigate some of the out-of-pocket expenses later on. This will provide for their care later in life when they need it. There are many different options for long-term care insurance now than years ago. It used to be that you only had it's almost like a life insurance policy, and whatever you paid into that policy goes away, even if you don't use a long-term care policy. There are now policies that you can, it's A part of it long-term care, part of it's investments. If you decide you don't want to use, the premiums can be funded to you, and you can have investments that are growing in that particular policy, which can also generate some additional income. Be aware of the difference in titling accounts with and or, because those things can make a lot of difference in how those assets are going to be handled later on. Again, consider moving assets out of the person who is ill for asset protection. Take note that IRA again and 401k ownership cannot be changed. That means if you have a 401k in your name or IRA in your name, those ownerships cannot be changed. You can change beneficiaries, but you cannot change the ownership of the person who actually set up or established those 401ks or IRAs in their own name. Perhaps use these as income and preserve the healthy spouse's assets. Again, work with a financial planner or advisor to determine how to draw down on assets to control the effects of taxes, but to also continue to provide opportunities for growth. Now, as a financial advisor, I've done this for people before. And you can actually look at, you can plug in assets, you can plug in debt, you can plug in income that is needed, and project out how you can draw down which assets, and you can change those things around, and how much you need according to inflation, according to how things are taxed in your state, as to the best way to handle that. And I'm telling you, working with a financial advisor planner can really save your financial house, no matter how much you have or matter or how much or little you have. It's very important to speak to someone. It can save you thousands and possibly tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on what your financial situation is. Next slide, please. Now, do your due diligence. This is for everything. You've heard me mention taking notes, keeping up with people you spoke to, with insurance companies, and times and dates, and keeping medical bills ordered and question all this stuff. Do the same thing with this. This is even more, I think, important, because this is everything you've worked for all your life. These are things that you depend on. This is how you live. This is your standard of life, standard of care and life and everything. So it's very important. Make sure you itemize everything. Even though you may think that little piece of antique or that art in the corner is unimportant, sometimes it can. We've all heard of things being passed down through generation, and we remember seeing it in the corner of grandma's house and mom's house, and now you have it in your house. So those things can end up being very valuable. And understanding what the value is and how important it is to you, it's very important to make sure these things are considered in your planning. And make sure you assign ownership to each thing according to how you want them to be transferred before or after death. Be conscious of tax ramifications in transferring some accounts to your estate and beneficiaries. Be aware of transferring assets out to others if it may cause an undue hardship on your spouse after your death, as well as tax ramifications to a beneficiary. Determine the best way to draw down on assets to pay for health care and in-home or outside of home needs if that becomes necessary. Again, can't stress this enough. Meet with an estate attorney and trusted financial planner advisor to make sure you are meeting all of the legal requirements so your needs will be met. Next slide. Now, here's some interesting things I found on my research, and this may sound, some of these numbers may not sound astounding, but this is only showing part of the picture. It's a lot more staggering or horrible now, coming through the last 2020 and up to now, in addition to how people have lost jobs and they have been going through savings. It's amazing these numbers have changed. And this is just looking at numbers for people who are not sick. So your situation will probably be a lot more. 68% of Americans do not have a will. That means the courts will be backed up with people who don't have wills going through probate, which means when you go through probate, it could take months, even now, even more so, because everything's backed up in the courts because the courts were closed. So everyone needs a will. The cost of a will is not very much. And there's different types of wills. You could get a will, if you have a simple will, $250, $300, depending on where you are in the state. But it is going to protect you, and it's going to protect your spouse. This could cost a family thousands with money going to people you may not want to get it. And after all court costs and final costs, including debt from estates, is resolved, how would that affect your spouse or children? 544,463, don't know how to round that number, Americans filed bankruptcy in 2020. That number is probably not going to go down. A lot of bankruptcy in the past as a result of medical debt. We know cancer is expensive. We know how easy it is to get into debt with the cost of medications. The percentage of households led by someone aged 65 to 74 who has credit card debt increased to 41% in 2019 from 27% in 1989, according to the Fed. That's a jump from an inflation adjusted $1,090 to $222,850 over the same period of time. Now, again, 2020 has made a large change. So I would be willing to bet, we haven't gotten the numbers, that is going to be substantially higher. Next slide. The percentage of households led by someone 75 years of age or older who has credit card debt rose to 28% in 2019 from 10% in 1989. The median amount of owed climbed from an inflation adjusted $400 to $2,700 over the same period. Now that's going to be higher. And that does not include mortgage debt or line of credit debt. And let me add medical debt. More than 84% of people age 65 are coping with at least one chronic condition, and often more as they age. A study in the Journal of General Internal Medicine revealed that out-of-pocket medical expenditures in the last 5 years prior to an individual's death totaled more than $38,000. Now, we know with some of the medications like Revlimid, it can be $26,000 a month, plus some of the other medications like Dara, those costs are extremely expensive. So even if you have some insurance, you may be paying a hefty copay. And if you do that for more than 1 or 2 years, you can see where that $38,000 can easily be on the low end. That leaves 1 in 4 seniors approaching bankruptcy, which is not a good outcome for seniors as they do not have the time to stabilize their financial situation. And certainly if you're ill or you're older, it'll be very difficult to find a job to make up for that loss. Next slide. According to the Government Affordability Office in 2019, about half of the households headed by a senior 55 have no retirement savings. Now, the debt on seniors is going up higher than any other age group population. And simply because, especially now, as we know, interest rates are so low, it's very difficult to find any types of assets that's going to earn any type of income. You may find government bonds or things maybe earning 1.3%, but if our inflation's 3.5%, 4%, you're not even keeping up with inflation. So you're actually losing money on your savings. That's, again, another reason why you need to speak to a financial advisor. There may be other ways to increase your income. According to the Social Security Administration, in 2016, 21% of married Social Security recipients and 43% of single recipients aged 65 or more depend on Social Security for 90% or more of their income. So if you have Social Security and you're depending on that, and we know Social Security caps out at a certain amount, and you have high medical debt, high costs for medications, you're in and out with labs, your copays, your deductibles, your max out-of-pockets are very high, and those things are not coming down in price. So you know that you're spending through a lot of your money. Find a way to speak to someone. They can meet with you and do a consultation with you to find out where you are and find out what your needs are. And your first meeting can be free. If they don't offer it, ask them, because majority of the time, if you're talking to a trusted financial advisor, it's going to be a free session. Take advantage of it. You're only going to help yourself. Next slide. If you don't have enough on your plate already, this is going to be one thing. Taking care of this is going to take a lot off your plate, because you'll be able to manage medical debt more. You'll be able to know the questions to ask, who to go to if you need financial resources, how much of financial resources you need, where to get them. Okay, so all of this is going to help take things off of your plate that may already be overloaded, right? The management of personal finances and keeping afloat can be like a heavy weight that you just can't get off your shoulders. I have found that many people put off discussing these issues with anyone, including their spouses. But suppressing doesn't make it go away. Instead, you are just internalizing it, which will in fact make matters worse. Stress, everybody knows what happens with stress. For those of you who are single and married, everyone then, take matters in your own hands. The medical bills are not going to go away. In fact, the cost of those things are going to go up. Your everyday expenses will not go away. In fact, they've gone up about 5% in the last year. And unfortunately, like I said, the cost of many staples have gone up 5% or more this year, last year alone. And a lot of times when they go up, rarely do they come back down the entire amount. And there's a very true old adage, and I'm telling you, hindsight is 2020. I learned this through some of the things that I didn't take care of, or my husband I didn't take care of before his death. If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. That is true for everyone. It helps you when you start planning and you put something down in writing, you see it. It makes more, it's real, it's real. And if you do something that's achievable, that's accurate, that makes sense to you, and a financial advisor can do that, tailored to your needs, to your desires, to things that you and your family's wishes, you will be planning for all of these contingencies that you don't may not even be aware of. Next slide. Talk to your spouse, then talk to a professional who can help steer you. I know through personal experience again and helping others what a great weight will be lifted off your shoulders. We know that finances, the difficult with handling money or not knowing how to handle money, is the number one leading cause of stress, anxiety, divorce, and then you put in an illness, a chronic, long-term, expensive illness, those things can just get out of hand. So why don't we take the time to talk to a financial advisor? If you don't know how to talk to a financial advisor, there are resources out through HealthTree. There are articles I've written. There are seminars we've done as to how you can find a financial advisor. And we can loop you in, and I think this out there as well, how to find a financial advisor, how to ask the questions of them, because you need to interview them. You need to have somebody you trust, because it is your assets. It's your hard-earned money. It's the work that you've done all your life to get you where you are now. Please look for those resources and take advantage of it. Next slide. Now, because it's such a very deep topic, it's not necessarily a very comfortable topic. Again, because this is a very, very difficult topic. It's not something just for people who have cancer. It's not just for spouses. It is for everyone. I can't tell you how many people I speak to who have not taken some of these steps, and it's not as difficult as you think it is. These steps are going to take a lot of stress off of you, your spouse, and it's going to bring up conversations that you probably wished you'd done years ago.
Mhm.
But it's very important. I can tell you, my husband and I, it
Hold
was,
on, Diana. I don't want to interrupt you, but we can't hear you very well. Do you have your microphone? If you could bring
I
it right
do.
in
Can
front.
you hear? Is that better?
Now we can hear it a lot better. Yeah.
Was it
Mhm.
difficult during the seminar?
It was a little. I didn't want to. If I had you at max volume, I could hear you, but now it's good.
Okay. I want to share a personal issue that my husband and I had, and I don't want anybody else to end up in this situation. Talking about money, not just bringing up the cost of treatment with your doctor. And that's very difficult because and a lot of doctors will not ask. But it's very important because this is all going to lead back to all this stuff on your one plate of your financial plate that we can relieve the stress. But talking to your spouse, even though you all sit down, write bills, you know what you're buying, you know these things, but rarely do we sit down and talk about it, and rarely do we update these things. And and when you have someone that's ill, it's even more difficult because you don't want to bring these things up to them. It's almost it's you feel you may feel like it's selfish. And that can come from either an ill person or the person who's not ill. But it helps relieve that other person, the person who's ill, may be worried, and they're going to let the other spouse know they're worried. but it's going to affect their health because their stress is going to cause all kinds of problems. And for the spouse who isn't ill, who's helping, who sees these things, who, and perhaps if you're older or in your household, you're the husband maybe taking care of all these things, and he may be the ill person. It wasn't something that you managed. It was always your husband. Your husband managed these things, which means it's even more important for you all to discuss this. And as a financial advisor, I should have known better, because I teach people these things, what to do. And I felt very uncomfortable bringing these things up to my husband. And it wasn't until about 2 weeks before he passed that, and it happened by him singing a song, the John Legend, "My head's underwater, I'm breathing just fine." And he sang that song to me for 2 hours over and over and over, like he was trying to get something through to me. And I kept thinking about when he was on life support before he came out. I said, "Who's going to take care of me when I'm old or if I'm sick?" And he said, "I will." And I said, "Well, if he's not here," he kept saying, "I will." And those things, those two things have stood with me, have stayed with me, and made me, 2 weeks before when he started singing the song, I started putting things together, whether I was right or wrong. But then we had that discussion, and discussion not only about finances and where things are, but also the discussion of the durable power of attorney, his life, his living will, how he wanted medically to be taken care of when he can't make the decisions on his own. And after that conversation, I was relieved. You can see the relief in his face. And I wished I had spoken about this years before. So please, it is well worth it. I am talking to, I will talk to patients, and these are things they're going through now. And there's guilt, and there's hard feelings, and I wish I had done it. And you don't want to have those thoughts. You don't want those things. You want everything to be positive, and you want to be as positive and as uplifting as possible. And a hard situation like this can be uplifting for both parties. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
my takeaway.
thank you so much. I think it means a lot, when you share those personal experiences, because it is real. It is an uncomfortable conversation to have. It is maybe not something that's pressing on our mind. We're thinking about how are we going to pay for Revlimid, not how are we going to organize our family finances. So I really do appreciate your preparation in this topic, and I'm excited to answer some questions. At the bottom of your screen, you see a Q&A. If you would like to enter your questions there, we have some coming in. Vicky is asking, excuse me, does Medicare and a supplemental plan pay for the majority of stem cell transplant? I think that's a great question when it comes to stem cell transplant, how to cover those costs.
It's very interesting. And I tell everybody, get to know your insurance plan because they can vary in different states depending what kind of plans. I've just recently come across like my own experience. My husband was approved for a stem cell transplant out of state. It was out of network. We went from Kentucky to Chicago to Northwestern and had all our papers. Yes, it's approved, it's approved. And what you have to be aware of is insurance plans providers are updating things all the time. People are pulling out of network. They're and you have to be aware, even if you've been approved, make sure that the day before you're going in, that you're still in that plan is still part of the provider. Because we found out afterwards, after stem cell transplant done, after his harvesting and stem cell was done, that it was no longer covered.
Oh my goodness.
And then you have to fight appeals, which could be a long process. So I would check, even within plans within your state, they can differ. I would check.
Okay.
One of the things that's come up recently is not just a stem cell transplant, but perhaps some maintenance after your stem cell transplant. And some of those insurance companies can also say, we're going to deny it, even though, and again, it depends on who you speak to at that plan, how many people you speak to, because you may get different answers. So no matter who you speak to, find out, keep that person's name, keep the time and the date you spoke to them, because that's going to be really great if you need appeals, and
Right.
have them send something out to you. Because if they send it out to you and you take a screenshot and you reply to that person, say, "Can I have your thing to reply?" That is going to be your ticket out of that appeal. That is going to help you fight that thing.
Right, right. What about Medicare specifically? Are you aware of how much Medicare contributes to the stem cell transplant?
I don't, and stem cell transplant costs can differ from state to state as well. So that would be something for you to talk to your healthcare team about, because they'll have an idea, and then maybe call your insurance to verify that information.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think as part of the transplant evaluation, that's something that you can talk to them to. They, have social workers there. They have other, people who are in their department specifically to help make sure that working with your insurance, figuring out how to manage the payment. So there's lots of people on your team willing to help you. But it is a great question. We have another question. What else can caregivers and myeloma patients do to better understand and take charge of their financial situation? What about day to day finances? I guess is what I'm thinking. Monthly budgets. What's something that you recommend?
Um, First, have a budget. Any kind of business, they have a budget. They know how much money they have coming in, and they so they can anticipate how much money is going to go out. And especially with the cost of healthcare, how those things are changing, ever changing, and your treatment plan may be changing, which means the cost is a very good idea to know what your core necessities are, right? And make sure your income is going to keep up with that. And again, that depends on where your income's coming from. And if you work with a financial advisor, they can really help you on that income side, right? And then yes, everybody get a budget sheet, and I'm going to have one if it's not online now. I have one to send out because I just had one, found a really good one to work. Do a budget planner, and that means everything that you spend. If you go buy a coffee, or if you go and buy things for grandchildren or whatever, keep a cost, keep a tally on how much that is, because that's money that you had. It's gone. It can't be used for anything else now. And that way
Yeah.
you can take your budget and you can put that into everything else. And you may be able to find things that, gosh, I'm really wasting money on that. And how much did I go to Kroger, and how much food did I throw away in my refrigerator because it became old, or meat became freezer burnt, and that's costly. That helps down and keep more income, keep more of that money in your own pocket.
Right. Yeah. One of the things is my husband have and I have been preparing our budget is we really ate out that many times. We really spent that much money
Yeah,
eating.
I know.
Yeah, it's
Right.
crazy.
The other thing is, look at some of those old things that you have, those things that you have that you don't use. And I was going through my bills, or my checking statement, and I realized I have Disney Plus, I have all the Hulu, and I have Netflix, and I have all of these Prime Video. I have all these things that I'm paying for every month and I'm not even using. Look at subscriptions to magazines, and or things you had online that you forgot is coming out of your
Right.
paycheck every month because you've forgotten about them. Those things can add up. Look at life insurance policies. If you find you don't need them anymore, why are you still paying premiums on them? Do they
Yeah.
have a cash value where you can take that cash value out, or you may not know they may have cash value that you can use for things you need it? Contact that financial advisor and find out what's accessible to you.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think we're stuck. Okay, there we are.
I know. It's like I don't know what's going on. It's kind of being weird today. All right, another question. After you receive a grant from a foundation, will they help you later on for medication?
Will they help you what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
It's okay. After you receive a grant from a foundation, will they help you later on for medication?
If we're talking about grants for copays, deductibles, if you're talking, will that help with medications? Generally, that's what they're for. Or
If
who's
they're,
asking something else?
I don't know, I think if we could have that question a little bit more specific, what was the original grant for? Was it for the medication? Or, I mean, it really depends, right? What is that original
It
grant
does.
for? What is it going to be used toward? How long ago did you get it? you know,
Right.
um, there's a
Because
lot of,
some grants could be for travel, other grants could be for copays and deductibles. Some grants can be for help you actually pay for your premiums on your medical insurance. But you also need to know when you get these grants, are those things going to apply to your deductible? So there's so much involved with those grants. If it's for medications, I think when you start looking at medications, the first place to go is the manufacturer of that medication. That is the
Yes.
first place to go because you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck then. And then go to your foundations like Leukemia Lymphoma Society, Cancer Cares, the Pan Foundation. Then look at those others that they can help with some of the other medications you may have, not just your cancer medications. And they also have the other assistance like travel, lodging, childcare, some of those things as well.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I was just going to mention to the audience is, Diana's here to help us in so many aspects. Like, we're getting some questions in how do we even find these foundations to help with money? And that's where you make an appointment. Diana's services are completely free. We'll be sending out her information. It is my financial coach at healthtree.org is her email, myfinancialcoach at healthtree.org. I'll be showing that later in one of the closing slides. But make an appointment with Diana. She's here to help. She has many, many foundations under her belt that she can refer you to, many grants that are accessible, especially for those drug copays. The last thing that we want is for you to be experiencing financial toxicity as well as a multiple myeloma diagnosis. That is absolutely the thing that we're trying to avoid and what Diana works literally every day to help you avoid. So there are lots of organizations out there to help you. There are lots of grants. There are lots of things even within your own state, within the federal government that can be of use to you. And we want to make sure that you're aware of all of them. Diana, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yes, I'd like to because a lot of people are not aware of really how much their treatment's going to cost, and they have not brought it up to the doctor. So you can go to foundation after foundation. If you're not getting what you actually need,
Exactly.
then you're like cutting your foot off in spite of everything you're doing.
Yeah.
So I can also help you formulate the questions for your doctor or for that healthcare team or that social worker so that we can make sure that everything's covered. You know, financial advisor advocates that work for hospitals, they're there to work for the hospital. They're not necessarily there to work for you because they're getting paid by the hospital, right? And so I would be glad to help you if you didn't feel comfortable talking to that person at um, um, Bristol Myers or any of those places. I will be glad to work with you on the phone. We've done 3 ways. I've helped people doing 3 ways on the phone. We got those applications done
That's
so they don't
awesome.
have to worry about it. And the worst thing is to procrastinate and put those things off because you're getting deeper and deeper in the hole, and you may have to put off treatment until those things are done, and you cannot afford to do that. It's your life.
Yep. Yep. I completely agree. Just Diana really is somebody to have in your corner, and we want to make sure that you're using her services, right, Diana? We have a follow up to that medication grant. So he was saying if you've received a grant for medication, is there a limit to how many times that you can apply for that grant? So he's wondering, you know, and when the grant runs out or when the grant expires, can I renew it or what's that process like?
Okay, so if you get it, let's say you can generally renew for a grant every 12 months. So if you received one in April, then you can apply again for the following year. So it's 12 months it would expire. If you don't, generally for all of these grants, if you don't use or submit claims within 90 days, then a lot of times those grants will go away. And you don't want that to happen.
Mhm.
You don't want to end up mid-year only using part of it, and then that grant's gone and you have to wait for another 12 months. So be aware of those things. If you have to tape that to something so you can see it, tape that something to see it because you're going to need that money. So it's generally every 12 months, and there's no limit as to how often you can do that. I know people have been getting grants from like LLS for years, and they make sure their paperwork is in and they do it. And I'm surprised LLS, as of last week, still had money available. I am so surprised because it has been a long time that they had still money available in July and it hasn't run out. I am shocked. I don't know if COVID is a result of that. I hope people are just not just sucking it up and just dealing with what they're dealing with. I hope they're taking advantage of it because it's amazing that
Right.
it's still out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And just another testament to how many resources are out there to help people, and don't think that, even if you're unsure if you qualify, that's something else that Diana can help with, because you might be right at that cusp of, oh, I didn't receive financial aid from these people because I make too much. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be the same case for everybody. I mean, these drug copays are insane.
They're right. And don't think you make too much either.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. If somebody has a question that is unanswered. Um, my last thing would just be talking about the Myeloma Coach program. Diana is our Myeloma Financial Coach. She is also in the Myeloma Coach program. This program is, again, free of charge, and it connects you with somebody who's going through the same journey as you. A lot of times it's difficult. I have younger myeloma patients who have kids at home who aren't even close to retirement and now are wondering what retirement's going to look like. Your myeloma journey financially is going to look a lot different than somebody in their 70s who's being diagnosed with myeloma. And I just want you to know that this myeloma coach program can help you find emotional connections with other younger myeloma patients and caregivers, can also help you financially if you talk with Diana and talk about, what are your options for the future financially, and what's that going to look like for you and your family. If you're an older patient that's being diagnosed, there is a lot to think about, and it is stressful. We were talking, I didn't love the statistic, but I saw that one of the statistics that you shared was those who are 65 and older have at least one chronic condition, if not more, the older that they get. Having those on top of trying to plan financially and trying to balance, your life emotionally, it can be really, really heavy. And so I really do recommend the Myeloma Coach program for an emotional connection, an educational connection, to know, what's ahead, what's coming, what is myeloma, what numbers should I be paying attention to. We have all those kind of resources, and especially, Diana here as a financial coach can really guide you, um, and help you find good financial advisors that can help take something off of your plate as well. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. We didn't have any more questions come in, so I'm gonna finish up now. But Diana, thank you so much
You're welcome.
for your contributions. I really enjoyed this topic, and I'm excited to share it with all of our registrants. Um, oh, we did get one more question, so I'll
Okay.
ask. They're asking about the generic Revlimid coming out next year. Do you know anything about that? And will insurance force the cheaper generic Revlimid versus the normal Revlimid?
That's interesting. I know a lot of people were on edge and they would really like to have this out there. It's actually been something that's been suppressed,
Mhm.
and they were only be able to get it out a little bit at a time. And it's coming out of India. And so there will be a biosimilar. Thank God for that one. And hopefully pretty soon we'll have one for Dara, but that's probably, they have people lock in their patents on these things for miles, years down the road. But that's going to be a great one. And as far as your insurance stating, do I have to go through a biosimilar? Generally, insurance companies, because they're going to, a lot of insurance companies will request that you get a biosimilar when one is appropriate and one is available to you. So it hasn't happened yet. There's going to be a lot more in the news, or we're going to have a lot more information about that. And as soon as we get it in, I will be putting an article, or letting everyone know what that's going to look like. But generally, insurance companies will request you go through a biosimilar prior to going to the other. And it's a great thing that's coming out. It's about time.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. That's wonderful news. I actually did not know about that. So
Mhm,
learning something new every day. I
mhm.
like it. Great. We'll finish up now. Um, this is Diana's contact information I was telling you earlier. Again, these slides are going to be sent out to all registrants within 48 hours of the event's conclusion. This is her email, myfinancialcoach@healthtree.org. You can also find her, as I mentioned, on that Myeloma Coach website, and look for other coaches that might be an emotional or educational connection that you want to talk to. Our next financial coach meeting will be on August 3rd at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll be talking about Social Security flexibility and choices for your retirement income. You might be interested in other myeloma crowd community events. tomorrow, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, is our Fitness for Myeloma chapter. And that is going to be our stress management. It's our second session in our stress management series. We're going to be talking about Reiki and massage. Shannon is going to come speak to us about how Reiki, which I had a definition up here, but I think I accidentally erased it. Reiki is kind of moving the energy through the body without touch. And then massage is obviously hands-on, but that is going to be a fun and I think intriguing event that teaches me something new. The next week, Thursday, July 15th, is going to be a live event. The Myeloma Caregiver chapter is going to be a live stream of a caregiver panel from our Coach Summit in Park City, Utah. We're going to have 3 different caregivers speak to us. And this event, all of your families are invited, caregivers, patients alike are invited to this event. We want to talk about how we can help the myeloma caregivers, we as a foundation, we as a coach program, and we and the patients as well that the caregivers are in this journey with. How can we more better support myeloma caregivers in their role? Wednesday, July 21st at 1 p.m. is the Connect with the Myeloma Crowd chapter. We're going to be talking about how to further myeloma research by connecting and validating our records on HealthTree Cure Hub. This is the 3rd or 4th series session in our HealthTree Cure Hub series. There's just so many amazing features of HealthTree Cure Hub that we want you aware of. And then on Thursday, July 22nd, is our newly diagnosed myeloma patients chapter. We have a representative from Skyline DX. They're going to come speak to us about how to discover if you're high risk of diagnosis. There's a new Sky92 genomics test that's able to go even more profound than the FISH test to discover what risk you are at in your myeloma. The link to sign up for any of those events is found at the bottom of the slide and can also be found in our follow-up email. Again, that will be sent out within 48 hours. Another thank you to our sponsors, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Karyopharm Therapeutics, AbbVie Adaptive Biotechnologies, Genentech, Oncopeptides, Indicator Oncology, and our new sponsor, Sanofi. And we thank you for sharing this virtual time with us and helping us grow this myeloma community. We hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. So thank you so much for sharing this time with us. And thank you, Diana.